The stage from Denver pulled into Leadville on the afternoon of the 4th of April, 1882, and the woman who stepped down from it was wearing a mourning dress of the strictest English cut, jet beads on the cuffs, and a veil of black crepe folded back over the brim of a straight-sided hat. And she had been a widow for 27 days. She was 34 years old. Her name, on the 7 trunks the driver was now unloading onto the boardwalk, read Cordelia W. The rest of it had been worn off the brass label by the salt of the Atlantic crossing. And the rest of it, in the records of the College of Heralds in London, ran Cordelia Wexford, Baroness Lanstephen in her own right, eldest daughter of the last baron of that line in the Welsh Marches, and now the widow, by 27 days, of Mr. Edmund Wexford of Spring Creek, Colorado, second son of the 2nd Viscount Asbury, late of Hertfordshire. She did not weep. She had wept in private on the 15th of March, on the bunk of a small steamer crossing from Liverpool to New York. After that, she had not. The driver, whose name was Halvorson, and who had been driving the Denver-Leadville run since the silver strike of '77, looked at her dress and at the 7 trunks, and at her face, which was set, and he said, loud enough for the 3 men loitering outside the depot to hear, one of whom was a lean, sun-darkened foreman with a low-slung colt at his left hip in the cross-draw fashion, and a scar that ran up under the sleeve of his rolled shirt. "Ma'am, you ain't gonna last out the month." She handed him a half-eagle for the unloading. She did not look at him. She did not respond to him. She walked into the depot, where the agent, a man named Cresswell, soft about the middle with a banker's collar, was already on his feet, because he had received, 3 days previously, a telegram from Denver, instructing him to be on his feet when she arrived. Within 41 days, the stage driver named Halvorson would be one of 4 men in Lake County, Colorado, who would publicly retract, before witnesses, the assessment he had just made. I have held the mourning dress. It is at the Colorado State Historical Society in Denver, in the costume vault, on the 2nd shelf from the bottom. The jet beads on the left cuff are slightly worn. The right cuff is not. A widow who keeps her own household accounts wears her left cuff against the desk in exactly that place. The wear is the testimony. There was a letter in the smallest of the 7 trunks. She had not unpacked it. She did not need to unpack it. She had read it on the steamer between Liverpool and New York, sometimes 3 and 4 times in a single evening, and she could recite from it the passage that concerned her now. The letter was dated the 11th of August, 1875, and it was the last letter Edmund Wexford had written from England before he sailed. "Cordelia," it began, "you will think me a coward for going to Colorado without you. My father will think me a fool. Your father, may his soul rest, would, I think, have thought me at last sensible. There is no living for a second son in this country, my dear, that does not depend upon the patience of an elder brother who has none. And so I will buy a ranch on the upper Arkansas, near a place called Leadville, which is presently producing more silver than the Bank of England would credit. And I will write you every Tuesday. The land is not pretty, but it is one's own. I will hold it in my name until we are married. After that, by the laws of the territory, which I have caused to be sent to me by post, and which I have read with the attention I never gave to my own father's deeds, it will be in your name as well as mine. I am told this matters in Colorado in a way that it does not matter at home. I am told that the wives here are sometimes ranchers, sometimes lawyers, occasionally physicians. I do not know how I will get on with such a country. I do not know how it will get on with me. I send you a sprig of mountain sage in this envelope. It does not smell, after 6 weeks of post, of anything but paper. But it smelled, when I picked it, of every summer I have not yet spent with you. She had read the letter on the steamer. She had read the letter on the eastbound train across New England in February. She had read the letter on the westbound train from Boston to Chicago, from Chicago to Omaha, from Omaha to Denver. She had read the letter on the stage from Denver to Leadville. She had not opened the envelope to look at the sprig of mountain sage, because she did not yet trust herself to look at it. The land, by the records of the Lake County Clerk, dated the 3rd of November, 1875, had been bought by Edmund Wexford for the sum of $3,400, comprising 6,400 acres along the Upper Spring Creek and an adjoining mineral claim of unproved value. By the records of the same clerk, dated the 12th of April, 1876, a month after the Colorado Constitutional Convention had completed its work, and 4 months before the territory would become a state in August of that year. The deed had been refiled in joint tenancy, naming both Edmund Wexford and Cordelia Wexford as owners, with right of survivorship. This last entry had been made, and this matters in the history of what followed, in the office of a young attorney in Denver named Mr. Wolcott, who had attended Yale Law in 1873, and who understood, as some of his Eastern colleagues did not, what the Colorado Married Women's Property Act of 1874 had done and would do. She did not know, on the afternoon of the 4th of April, that Mr. Wolcott had died of pneumonia 3 weeks before her husband. She did not know that the file in his office had been transferred to an associate. She did not know that the associate had been visited 2 days previously by a gentleman who had introduced himself as Mr. Hartwell Pembroke of the Inner Temple, London. If you came here for stories of women who carried a Welsh hymnal in one hand and the deed to a Colorado silver claim in the other, the small button beneath this video keeps them coming. That is all I will ask of you. Cresswell, the depot agent, walked her to the Clarendon Hotel because the Clarendon was where ladies stayed in Leadville, and because the Clarendon was the only establishment in Leadville at which the lobby had carpet. He carried her smallest trunk himself. The other 6 he had instructed a porter to follow with on a flatbed cart, which was usual. What was not usual, on the boardwalk between the depot and the hotel, were the 3 men outside the depot. They had risen when she walked past. 1 had taken off his hat, 2 had not. The one who had taken off his hat was a tall, lean, sun-darkened man in his late 30s, irregular features, a scar that ran from below his left elbow up under the cuff of his rolled shirt sleeve and disappeared into the cloth. And he had taken his hat off slowly, not theatrically, in the way a man takes off his hat when he is paying a respect. He was not certain, an hour ago, that he intended to pay. She did not see him. She walked past. He put his hat back on after she had walked past, and he turned to the man on his right, a heavier man, beardless, in a banker's coat that did not fit him. And he said, quietly, "That's her, then." "That's her," the banker's clerk said. "She came on time," the foreman said. "Pembroke's the one who's late. Pembroke's coming by way of Cheyenne. He'll be in by the 11th of May. Maybe sooner if the snow up at Mosquito has gone." The foreman considered this. He scratched the scar on his forearm absently. It was an old habit. The scar had been put there by a longhorn steer in 1873, when he had been a ranger out of Brackettville, Texas, and it itched in weather that was about to change. "All right," he said. "We've got 40 days, maybe a few more. Tell Mr. Cresswell I'll come into town tomorrow." "You're not going to talk to her today?" "No," the foreman said. "Today she's just got off a stage. She's 27 days a widow. Tomorrow we'll see what kind of widow she is." The Clarendon's lobby had a Brussels carpet, a piano that no one in town could quite play, and a portrait of General Grant on the south wall. The clerk, whose name was Henry Tabor, no relation, he was always careful to say, to H.A.W. Tabor of the Matchless Mine, who was at that time the wealthiest man in Lake County and was known to all of Leadville simply as Whore, gave her the corner room on the second floor, west-facing, with a view across Harrison Avenue to the bare brown shoulder of the mountain that everyone in town called Carbonate Hill, because the silver in it was the carbonate kind and not the lead kind, although the lead came up with it, and the smelters did not particularly distinguish. She signed the register. She wrote, "Cordelia W. Wexford, Spring Creek Ranch." She did not write Flan Stephen. The barony was hers under the Welsh peerage. It was not, as her father had once observed, an asset that could be banked at Leadville. She asked Mr. Tabor, the clerk, 2 questions. The first question was where she could send a telegram tonight. The second question was the name of the foreman of Spring Creek Ranch. Mr. Tabor answered the first question. The Western Union office was at the corner of Harrison and East 7th, opened until 10 o'clock. And then, on the second question, he hesitated. "Sam Doolittle, ma'am," he said. "He's been with the ranch since '76. Mr. Wexford brought him up from Texas." "Thank you, Mr. Tabor. Ma'am, if I may. He's a good man. He's a hard man, but he's good with the land. And he was with your husband at the end." She looked at the clerk. Whatever he had expected, and he had expected, I think, a polite English nothing, was not what he received. "Was he?" she said. "Mr. Tabor, was anyone with my husband at the end?" The clerk swallowed. "Mr. Doolittle was, ma'am." "Thank you," she said. She walked up the stairs. She did not look back. The clerk watched her go, and when she had turned at the landing, he went into the small back office where the proprietor kept a brandy decanter and a Bible, and he poured himself a measure of brandy, which he did not, ordinarily, take in the afternoon. The room was warm. The west sun came through the window in a slab. She unpinned her hat. She did not take off her gloves yet. She stood at the window with the gloves still on, and she looked out at Carbonate Hill for what may have been 4 minutes or 6. Then she sat at the small writing desk by the window, and she took off her gloves, and she opened the smallest of the trunks, which had been brought up first, and she removed 3 objects from it. The first object was Edmund's pocket watch. She had carried it in her travelling case from Liverpool because she had not trusted the trunks. It had stopped at 28 minutes past 4. On what day, she did not know. She wound it. It began to tick. She set it on the desk. The second object was a small leather portfolio. Inside were 3 documents, copied in her own hand on the steamer because she had not trusted the originals to be unrolled in a cabin where seawater might reach them. The originals were in a tin lockbox in the bottom of the largest trunk, which had not yet arrived at her door. The copies, in her hand, read, A certified extract from the Colorado Recorder of Deeds for Lake County, dated the 12th of April, 1876, showing the refiling of the Spring Creek deed in joint tenancy. A certified extract of the Marriage Register of St. Asaph's, Denbighshire, dated the 3rd of June, 1873. A certified copy made by Mr. Walcott of Denver in 1878 of the relevant sections of the Constitution of the State of Colorado, bearing upon the rights of married persons, and of sections 1 through 9 of the Married Women's Property Act of the State of Colorado, 1874. Adopted, as Mr. Walcott had pointed out, in a margin note in his own hand, 2 years before statehood, and reconfirmed by Act of the State Legislature in 1877. She read the margin note. It was in pencil. The pencil had not been sharp. It read, "She holds in her own name separate property, without husband's consent. He cannot devise it from her. So far as the state of Colorado is concerned, she is sole owner. Walcott." The third object she did not put on the desk. She held it in her hand. It was a small box, jet black, lacquered, the size of a deck of cards. It contained, and I have seen this box at the Wyoming-Colorado Pioneer Museum at Pueblo, behind glass, a mourning ring of jet and gold, with under the jet a small woven knot of dark hair, which the records of the museum identify as Edmund Wexford's, taken from his head on the 8th of March, 1882, by Mr. Doolittle, who had then sealed it in an envelope and posted it to Liverpool, where she had received it on the 2nd of April, 3 days before she sailed. She held the box for a long while. She did not open it. By 5:20, she was at the Western Union office at the corner of Harrison and East 7th. She sent 2 telegrams. The first was to a London address, care of the firm of Bowen, Treffer and Bowen, Lincoln's Inn, the solicitors who had handled her father's affairs, and who had handled, after some persuasion, the steamship ticket she had bought in March. The telegram, which was paid by the word, and which she therefore composed with the economy that any Welsh peeress acquires in the matter of money, read, "Arrived Leadville, 4th stop, confirm. Pembroke expected 11th May, stop. Wire copy of Chancery writ, if filed, stop. Regards, W." The second telegram was longer. It was to a Denver address, the office of Mr. Hiram Branscombe, an attorney who had taken over Mr. Walcott's files in 1881. It read, "Request confirmation whether Colorado Supreme Court has ruled on comity of English Chancery devise as against State Statute 1874. Stop. If no ruling, please advise whether any lower court has considered the question. Stop. Matter urgent. Party arriving within 40 days. Stop. Cordelia W. Wexford. Stop." The Western Union clerk, who was 18 years old, and who had not been told that the lady in mourning would be sending telegrams in the legal English of a London solicitor, counted the words twice. He charged her finally $4.40, which she paid in eagle gold. She walked back to the Clarendon as dusk fell. The bell of the Catholic Church on East 7th rang the half-hour. A dog barked at her in a side alley and stopped because she did not flinch. A man on the boardwalk outside the Cloud Saloon held the door open for her without looking at her, which is the politest a man in Leadville knew how to be. She did not see Sam Doolittle, who was standing in the shadow of the awning of the livery on the opposite side of the street, who watched her walk past, and who did not move until she had reached the lighted doorway of the Clarendon. He was watching particularly her right hand. She was not carrying anything. She was wearing one glove and had taken the other off. Her right hand was bare, and on the third finger he could see, where she lifted her hem an inch to step over a runoff puddle, a band of skin, paler than the rest, where a wedding ring had been for 9 years and had been removed. He scratched the scar on his forearm. The weather, somewhere up at Mosquito Pass, was about to change. He turned around and walked back toward the livery stable, where he had left his horse, and he rode out of Leadville at dusk, and he did not stop at Spring Creek Ranch until close to midnight. And the first thing he did when he reached the bunkhouse was wake his second man, Joaquin Solis, a vaquero out of Las Vegas, New Mexico, who had been with the outfit since '79, and tell him to be saddled and on the south fence line by sunrise. What's at the south fence line, Sam? Possible riders out of Twin Lakes. From the Halvorson outfit? Could be. Sam, she only got off the stage today. That's right. So why are we riding the south fence at sunrise? The foreman thought about this. He poured himself a measure of black coffee that had been on the stove since supper, and he did not answer for a moment. And when he answered, his voice was lower than it had been all day. Joaquin, he said, she's not what they were expecting. She's not what Halvorson was told to expect. When Halvorson finds out what she actually brought with her in those trunks, he is going to do something stupid, and he is going to do it within 10 days. I would like, when he does it, to know about it before he does. Joaquin, who had been with Wexford and Doolittle for 3 years, and who had observed in that time a man who did not raise his voice and did not use the word stupid lightly, set down his coffee. All right, Sam. She did not sleep the first night. She sat at the small writing desk by the window with her husband's pocket watch ticking on the desk, and she opened, for the first time, the envelope from the letter of August '75. The sprig of mountain sage was still there. It had not, after 7 years in paper, retained any smell of sage. It smelled instead of paper and of the lavender her mother had once put into linen drawers at Llanstephen Hall. At 20 minutes past 3, she wrote in her diary, and the diary is at the Colorado State Historical Society, and I have read it. The handwriting is steady, and the ink does not blot. These words: arrived Leadville. The town is at altitude, and the air thin. He is buried, they tell me, in the evergreen cemetery on the hill behind the church. I will go in the morning. The foreman of the ranch, Mr. Doolittle, late of Texas, has not yet called. He will. The clerk at the hotel is afraid of me, which I cannot explain. The Denver attorney will wire by Friday. Pembroke is expected within 40 days. I have until then to be ready. Underneath, in a smaller hand, as if added later, I do not know what the law of this state will do. I know what the law of this state says it will do. There is, in Colorado, a difference. She closed the diary. She blew out the lamp. She did not undress. She sat in the dark and listened to the watch. At 5 minutes past 6, on the morning of the 5th of April, a boy on a sorrel pony rode up Harrison Avenue at a flat run, dismounted at the awning of the Clarendon Hotel, and told the night clerk that he had a message for the English lady that could not wait. The night clerk, who had been told by Tabor before he left at midnight that any message for the English lady was to be taken upstairs at any hour, took the message upstairs. He knocked twice. He waited. He knocked again, lighter, and said through the door, "Ma'am, There's a boy from Spring Creek. Mr. Doolittle sent him." The door opened almost at once. She was still in her dress of the day before. She had not slept, and she had not changed. And the night clerk afterwards told the proprietor's wife that the lady looked, at 6 in the morning, exactly the way she had looked at 6 the night before, which the night clerk had not previously believed of any human being he had encountered in 11 years of frontier hotel work. She read the message. It was in pencil, on the back of a Western Union form. It read, "Mrs. Wexford, fence cut along South Line in the night. About a mile of it. 2 cattle dead. Halvorson sign. I am riding into town now. If you can be ready at 7:30, I would like to take you out to the ranch. Bring a coat. Roads not yet dry. S. Doolittle." She read it twice. She gave the boy a $50. She told the night clerk, please, to send a pot of coffee and a slice of bread, and to send up word to the livery for a side saddle horse. No, on second thought, a regular cavalry saddle would do. She had her own habit. And to send up Mr. Tabor when he arrived in the morning, which was usually at 7. She closed the door. She looked at her hands. They were not shaking. She did not, on this occasion, take very long. The riding habit had been in the second smallest trunk, and the second smallest trunk had been brought up the night before. The habit was the dark green wool that she had worn at her father's funeral hunt in October 79, cut by a tailor in Ludlow who had understood that a baroness in her own right might be expected to ride in country where the heather was hard and the slopes were not gentle. The skirt was longer than was now fashionable in Bostonian riding clubs. It was, however, a skirt one could ride a working horse in. The cuffs of the sleeves were leather-bound. The collar was high. The buttons were horn. She did not change the mourning veil. She folded it inside the lapel. Sam Doolittle came into the Clarendon lobby at 7:23 with his Stetson in his hand, and Mr. Tabor, who had arrived at 5 past, looked at him in a way that said both Sam, be careful, and Sam, she is upstairs. She came down the stairs at 7:30 exactly. She had heard the church bell on East 7th strike the half from her window. She came down with one hand on the banister and the other carrying a pair of riding gloves of the same dark green as the habit. He did not say his name. She did not ask. "Mrs. Wexford, Mr. Doolittle." "Ma'am." "I was with him at the end. I thought, before we go out, you should hear that." Mr. Tabor said as much. "Did he speak?" "At the end? No. The night before, yes." "What did he say, the night before?" The foreman looked at his hat. He looked at her gloves. He did not look at her face, because he had learned, in 9 years on the Texas frontier and 6 in Colorado, that the safest place to look at a woman who is asking that question is at her hands. He said, "Sam, when she comes, you tell her the deed is in the lockbox in the office, and the second key is sewn into the lining of the carpet bag with the brass fittings. And you tell her that I was sober when I signed it." He said it 3 times. He was clear on the 3 things. She closed her hand on the gloves. "Thank you, Mr. Doolittle." "Ma'am, there's also the matter of the fence. You can tell me about the fence on the road." The road out of Leadville climbed north along Spring Creek for 9 miles, then turned west at a stand of cottonwoods where the creek met the upper Arkansas, then climbed again into a basin that was not yet, on the morning of the 5th of April, free of the last of the snow. She rode at his left. He had brought, from the livery, a bay gelding of about 15 hands, with a hard mouth and a sensible eye. The eye was the thing she had checked first. The mouth she had figured she could manage. I have ridden, in middle life, the trail from Leadville up to what was then the Wexford property. The road is paved as far as the cottonwoods. After that, it is what it was. I rode it in June. I rode it slowly because I did not that day want to hurry. She rode it on the 5th of April, 1882, and what the foreman's records and his records are at the State Historical Society, and I have read them, and the handwriting is bad but legible, describe as the lady's own pace, which is faster than I had laid out. A mile from the cottonwoods, she said, "Mr. Doolittle, tell me about the fence. Cut in 7 places along the south line, the line that divides our south pasture from the Halvorson bar T. Each cut is about 30 yards from the next. 2 head are dead, both ours, both bullets. 1 at the cut, 1 1/4 mile inside our line. The riders came in at about 11 last night, by the moon. They were gone before 3. Why 2 cattle and not more? That is a fair question, ma'am, and I have an answer I do not like. They killed 2 head to make a point. If they had wanted the cattle, they would have driven 100. They wanted us to see the sign. What is the sign? That the south fence is no longer a fence. That if you do not sell to Halvorson before Mr. Pembroke arrives, the south fence will continue not to be a fence. That is the sign. She rode for perhaps half a mile without speaking. Mr. Doolittle. Halvorson is the owner of the bar T. Otto Halvorson. Came up from Texas in '73. Has the largest outfit in Lake County after Tabor's mines. And he knows about Mr. Pembroke. He does. How does he know? 2 men have come through Leadville in the last 3 weeks, asking about the Wexford widow and the Wexford deed. One was a clerk from a Denver law office. He was harmless. The other was a man named Crane, who works for Halvorson. Crane asked specifically whether there was an English heir. She rode on. The morning was cold. The breath of the bay gelding made small clouds in front of her face. And what did the town tell him? What the town knew, which was that an English gentleman of the family was expected. The town did not know, because I had not told the town, that the deed was a joint tenancy. You knew? Mr. Wexford told me in '76. He told me again last winter. Was it not on the public record at Leadville? Ma'am, it was filed in Denver. The Lake County Clerk's Index has it under the joint name. To find it, you would have to look. I do not believe Mr. Crane looked. Then Halvorson believes the property goes to Mr. Pembroke under the English will. He believes whatever Mr. Pembroke has told him to believe. They have been in correspondence since February. She did not, for a long moment, react. Mr. Doolittle, how do you know they have been in correspondence? Mr. Wexford forwarded me 3 letters in February that came to the ranch addressed to him. They were from a Denver firm. The firm represented an English client. The English client had not yet given his name. I opened the letters because Mr. Wexford was at that point too ill to read them. The English client gave his name in the second letter. It was Mr. Pembroke. Did Mr. Wexford see the letters? He saw the second one. He read it. He laughed once. He said, "Sam, the boy thinks he can get my ranch with a writ from Chancery." He said it in exactly those words. Then he put the letter in the lockbox, and he did not speak of it again. She rode in silence to the next bend of the creek. The first sight of Spring Creek Ranch was at the top of a small rise where the road came around a stand of bare aspen. It was not pretty, Edmund had warned her in his letter that it would not be pretty. The main house was a low, long structure of square-cut logs with a shake roof and a porch the depth of two of her father's old library tables set on a slope above the creek. Behind it stood a barn, the color of weathered iron, and a bunkhouse, the color of nothing in particular. Beyond, a corral of split rails, and beyond the corral, a pasture that ran down to the creek, and a pasture beyond the creek that rose to a low ridge of dark spruce. On the ridge, in two places, she could see the smoke of two small fires. On the road below them, she could see two riders moving north at a deliberate pace. "The riders," she said, "Joaquin and Mendez. They are on our line. The fires are Halvorson's. He set them where we will see them. That is not subtle. He is not a subtle man, ma'am. Mr. Doolittle, before we go in, I would like to see the south fence." He looked at her. He had not expected this. He had expected her to go to the house first, to see the kitchen, to see the room her husband had died in, to see the small office where her husband had kept his books. He had expected, possibly, to give her a quarter of an hour to weep in private, and then to take her into town again before sundown. "Ma'am, the south fence is 4 miles further on. It will take us until nearly noon. We will not be at the house until afternoon." "I understand, Mr. Doolittle, and we may meet riders. Then we will meet them." They did not meet riders. They rode 4 miles south through a sage flat where the ground was still hard with the frost of the night before, and they came at 10:30 to the cut wire. She dismounted. She walked along the line for perhaps 200 yards, examining the cuts. She knelt at one of them, removed her glove, and held the cut end of the wire in her bare hand for the space of 3 breaths. The wire was twisted barb of the Glidden pattern, of the kind that had begun to be common on Colorado ranges since '78. The cut was clean. It had been done with a wire cutter, not with bolt shears. "Mr. Doolittle, do your men carry wire cutters?" "They do." "Do Halvorson's men carry wire cutters?" "They do." "Does anyone in Lake County not carry wire cutters?" The foreman almost smiled. He did not quite. "Mr. Tabor of the Matchless does not, ma'am." She stood. She put the glove back on. She walked to where the first dead steer lay, a roan, 4 years old by his teeth, shot once below the ear at close range with what the foreman, who knew, said was a .44. She walked to the second, a quarter mile further along, a black, 3 years, same caliber, same range. "Mr. Doolittle, I would like the brand on these 2 cattle to be recorded today by a witness who is not in Halvorson's pay and not in mine. I would like a magistrate, if one is available, to take a statement from your man Joaquin and from yourself as to the condition of the fence and the cattle. I would like a copy of that statement to be in my hands before sundown." He looked at her. "Ma'am, the nearest magistrate is in Leadville. We would have to bring him out." "Then we will bring him. That is 6 hours. Then we have time." He did not, that morning, ask her why. He worked it out on the ride back to the main road. By the time he had worked it out, he had ridden 3 miles, and he had concluded that the widow of Edmund Wexford had understood, before he had, that the fight was not a fight between her and Halvorson over a fence. It was a fight that would, within 40 days, be argued before a court, and that everything she put in evidence today would be on her side of the bench when that hour came. He scratched the scar on his forearm, and he said, half to himself and half to the bay gelding she was riding ahead of him. Edmund, you found yourself a lawyer. It was past 3 in the afternoon when they came in sight of the main house for the second time. He had ridden into Leadville and back with the magistrate, a Mr. Dawes, a justice of the peace who had been Walcott's friend in Denver before Walcott's death, and who therefore knew the names that mattered. And they had ridden with Dawes to the south fence and back, and Dawes had taken his statement, and Dawes had ridden back to Leadville with a copy of it in his saddlebag, and another copy in Mr. Doolittle's saddlebag, and a third in hers. She had not yet been into the house. She dismounted at the porch. She stood at the bottom of the 3 steps. Mr. Doolittle led the gelding away to the barn without being asked. He had understood, by this point in the afternoon, that there were certain things she would do alone. She climbed the 3 steps. She put her hand on the door. It was not locked. Edmund had not locked it. Sam had not locked it. She pushed it open. The room was a kitchen. There was a stove. There was a long table of pine, scarred. There was a brace of antlers above the door to the inner room. There was a glass jar on the windowsill in which someone, a man by the way the jar had been pushed, had stuck a few sprigs of dried mountain sage. She stood in the doorway for a long while. She had thought on the steamer that she had used up her crying for him on the 15th of March. She found that she had not. She stood in the kitchen doorway for I do not know how long. The foreman, who had come back from the barn and who was waiting on the porch, did not come in. He sat on the porch step with his back to the door, and he did not turn around until he heard her, behind him, speak in a voice that was steady. "Mr. Doolittle, is there a room upstairs that he was building?" "Yes, ma'am. Show me, please." The room upstairs was small. It had a window that faced east. It had a low, sloped ceiling. It had a chest of pine against the inner wall. The chest was a cradle. It was not finished. The bottom and 3 sides had been planed and pinned. The 4th side had not yet been pinned in. The work was honest, slow, by a man who had not done it before. A small plane lay on the floor beside the cradle, a jar of nails, a length of penciled measure on the wall, a single horizontal stroke at what would have been the height of a child of 2. She stood at the cradle for a long while. She did not touch it. She did not weep. The crying she had owed him, she had paid the hour before, in the kitchen. She knelt, finally, and she picked up the unfinished side of the cradle. She set it gently against the 3rd side. She did not pin it in. She left the small plane where it was. She left the jar of nails where it was. She went to the window. She struck a match. She lit a single candle on the sill. A candle that had been left there by Mr. Doolittle, the records of the ranch say, 3 days after Edmund's death, and not since replaced. She sat on the floor beside the cradle for 3 minutes by Edmund's pocket watch, which she had carried up the stairs with her, in her hand. She did not speak. She did not pray, exactly. She sat with the watch in her hand, and the candle burning on the sill, and the small, unfinished cradle beside her. And at the end of 3 minutes, she stood and she walked downstairs. The foreman, who had not gone in, met her at the porch. "Mr. Doolittle, I will take supper in the bunkhouse tonight with you and your men. After supper, I would like to see the office. After the office, I would like to ride back to Leadville. I cannot tonight stay in this house. Ma'am, the road back at night. I know. Mr. Doolittle, please." He looked at her face. He did not argue. He went to the bunkhouse to tell Joaquin. "I have stood in that room. The cradle is still there. The ranch was bought by the state of Colorado in 1963 as part of the Spring Creek Pioneer Memorial. The upstairs room has been kept as it was. The pencil mark on the wall is still there. The plane is in a glass case at the head of the stairs. The fourth side of the cradle has never, by deliberate decision of the curator, been pinned in. I have stood there in October. I do not, when I stand there, think first of the Married Women's Property Act of 1874, or of the doctrine of comity in American conflict of laws jurisprudence, or of the $8,000 in silver that the Halvorson Bar T was, by midsummer, prepared to pay for the Spring Creek deed. I think of a man who had time to build 3 sides of a cradle and not the 4th. I think of a woman who, in the 3rd month of her widowhood, climbed a flight of stairs and chose to leave the 4th side where it lay. It was past 9 when she rode back into Leadville with Mr. Doolittle riding behind her. They did not speak on the road. At the door of the Clarendon, she dismounted. She handed him the reins of the bay gelding. She said, "Mr. Doolittle, tomorrow morning at 8, please. We have, by my count, 36 days. I should like to use them." He nodded. She walked into the Clarendon, where Mr. Tabor, who had been sitting in the lobby with his hat on for an hour and a quarter, rose to his feet, and she said, "Mr. Tabor, a telegram has come from Denver. Please." He gave her the telegram. It was from Branscombe. It read, "No Colorado ruling on comity yet. Stop. Lower court in Pueblo, 1880. Declined to enforce English Chancery decree as against Colorado statute, 1874. Stop. Case unreported. Stop. I can obtain a certified copy from clerk by May 1st. Stop. Branscombe." She read it twice. She folded it. She put it inside the breast of her habit, where the small leather portfolio was. "Mr. Tabor, ma'am, send a man to Pueblo tomorrow morning with the gold for the certified copy. I will write a draft tonight on the Boatman's Bank of St. Louis. $20 should cover it. I want the certified copy in this hotel by the 8th of May. Ma'am, Pueblo is, Mr. Tabor, please, by the 8th of May. He nodded. She went upstairs. She did not this night sit in the dark. She sat at the desk, and she wrote, in the steady hand that the diary preserves, the following sentences. The fence is cut. There is a cradle in the upper room. Branscombe has found Pueblo. Pembroke arrives in 36 days. The foreman is what Edmund said he was. Underneath, smaller. I am not tonight certain that I will sleep. I am, however, certain that I will not yet need to. She lifted her right hand. She looked at the band of paler skin on her 3rd finger. She opened, for the first time, the small lacquered box that had come from Liverpool. She took the mourning ring out. She did not put it on her 3rd finger. She put it on her smallest, the 4th, where it sat loose. She did not, that night, intend to wear it as a wedding ring. She intended to wear it as a witness. She blew out the lamp. Outside, somewhere in the alley behind the Cloud Saloon, a single shot was fired, well past midnight, into the air. It did not, in Leadville in 1882, particularly surprise anyone. It did not, on the 2nd floor of the Clarendon Hotel, surprise her either. She did not, however, sleep until close to 4, and by 7:30 the next morning, in dark green riding habit and one new ring on her 4th finger, she was downstairs in the lobby, with her riding gloves in her hand, waiting for the foreman. She had 35 days left. Mr. Hartwell Pembroke of the Inner Temple arrived at the Leadville depot on the afternoon of the 9th of May, 1882, 2 days earlier than expected because the snow at Mosquito Pass had gone sooner than the stage company had predicted. He stepped down from a private coach he had hired in Denver. He wore a frock coat of grey wool and a hat of the kind that London insisted upon and that no man in Lake County had ever willingly purchased. He brought with him 2 trunks, a leather case containing what he had reason to believe was a decisive instrument of English equity, and a clerk named Sidwell, who had been sick the entire stage and who was, by the time the coach pulled in, the colour of skimmed milk. He was 47 years old. He was the nephew of the 2nd Viscount Asbury. He was, by the Viscount's careful arrangement, and by the writ he carried in the case, the residuary devisee under the English will of Edmund Wexford, late of Spring Creek, a will Edmund had executed, hurriedly and without American advice, before his sailing in '75, and which, by an irregularity of the English testamentary statutes of 1837, had never been revoked. Pembroke had spent 6 months, and rather more of the Viscount's money, preparing the writ. He believed it to be airtight. He had presented it, in chambers, before a master who had told him, in obiter dicta only, that the question of comity with the American states was, and the master had used the word twice, an inconvenience. Pembroke had decided, on the Atlantic crossing, that he would not be inconvenienced. He went directly to the Clarendon Hotel. He asked for the proprietor. The proprietor sent for Mr. Tabor. Mr. Tabor sent the boy at the desk to the office of Mr. Dawes, the Justice of the Peace, to inform Mr. Dawes that the English gentleman had arrived. The boy at the desk then went, on his own initiative, to the livery stable down the block, where he knew that on most afternoons a horse belonging to the Spring Creek Ranch was hitched at the 3rd rail, and he told the man holding the horse's bridle, who happened that day to be Joaquin Solis, that Mr. Pembroke had just walked into the lobby of the Clarendon. Joaquin rode out of town at a long lope. He covered the 9 miles to the ranch in just under an hour, which on the bay he was riding was honest work and not showmanship. And when he came up the road, past the cottonwoods, he saw Sam Doolittle on the porch, and he raised one hand in the signal they had agreed upon 34 days previously. Sam went into the house and brought out a folded paper from the office. The paper was a notice, already drawn, addressed to Mr. Hartwell Pembroke, Inner Temple, in care of the Clarendon Hotel, Leadville. It had been written by Mrs. Cordelia Wexford in her own hand on the 3rd of May. It had been waiting on the desk in the office at Spring Creek for 6 days. Sam put it in his coat pocket. He rode back into town with Joaquin. They arrived at the Clarendon at 20 minutes past 5. What happened the next morning, the 10th of May, in the lobby of the Clarendon Hotel at the meeting hour requested by the notice, is known from 3 sources: from the diary of Mrs. Wexford, from the notes of Mr. Dawes, the Justice of the Peace, who attended at the lady's request, and from a long account written 22 years later by Mr. Sidwell, Pembroke's clerk, who left Pembroke's service shortly afterwards and went into the wholesale lumber business in St. Louis, where he did, by his own admission, considerably better. The 3 accounts agree on most of what was said. Where they disagree, I have, in what follows, taken the diary's word. She came down to the lobby at 5 minutes to 10. She wore the same morning dress in which she had stepped off the stage on the 4th of April. Washed once, at the Clarendon's expense, the jet beads slightly more worn on the left cuff than the right. The mourning ring was on the 4th finger of her right hand. Pembroke and Sidwell were already seated at the small table in the corner of the lobby that the Clarendon kept for what the proprietor called private interviews. Mr. Dawes sat at a third chair. Sam Doolittle stood at the foot of the staircase with his hat in his hand. He had been instructed, by her, to stand and not to sit. She did not at first sit either. Mr. Pembroke, Mrs. Wexford, may I begin by expressing the very sincere condolences of my uncle the Viscount? Mr. Pembroke, I have read your letter of the 7th of March, which reached me on the steamer. I have read the notice of the Chancery filing of the 22nd. I have your writ before me. She did not have it before her. The original was in Pembroke's leather case, 8 inches from his right hand. What she had before her was a copy she had ordered from London in March, and which had reached her in Leadville the previous week. I am prepared to address the writ in 3 languages. If you will permit me, I will address it first in English, because that is your tongue, and the tongue of the court whose writ you bear. I will address it second in Welsh, because Welsh is the tongue of the deed by which my late father held the manor of Llanstephen, and is also the tongue in which my late husband and I exchanged the vows that, by the marriage register of St. Asaph's of the 3rd of June, 73, you contend made me his property under the laws of England. And I will address it third in Latin, because Latin is the tongue of the common law and of the equity to which you appeal, and because there are 2 phrases in the matter, comitas gentium and lex loci re sitae, which it will be convenient to use in their proper form. Sidwell, in his later account, wrote that Pembroke at this point opened his mouth slightly and did not, for nearly 30 seconds, close it. She sat. She placed 3 documents on the table. She did not, in placing them, speak. The first was the certified extract from the Lake County Recorder of Deeds, dated the 12th of April, 1876, showing the Spring Creek deed refiled in joint tenancy with right of survivorship. The second was the certified copy made by the unfortunate Wolcott of Denver in 78 of Sections 1 through 9 of the Colorado Married Women's Property Act of 1874, and of those provisions of the Constitution of the State of Colorado bearing on the property rights of married persons. The third was the document that had reached her by the courier Tabor had hired on the 7th of May from Pueblo. It was a certified copy, signed and sealed by the clerk of the District Court of Pueblo County, of the unreported decision of that court of the 14th of October, 1880, in the matter of Hollister versus the estate of Hollister, in which the court had ruled, and the ruling ran to 4 pages of close handwriting, that a decree of the English Court of Chancery purporting to devise Colorado real property by primogeniture in derogation of the statutory rights of a Colorado wife under the Act of 74 would not be enforced by the courts of Colorado as a matter of comity, because to enforce it would be to subordinate the policy of the state of Colorado to a foreign rule that the state of Colorado had, by deliberate legislation, set aside. Pembroke read the documents. He read them carefully. He read them a second time. His hand, on the third reading, was not quite steady. She did not, while he read, speak. When he had finished, she said, in English first, "Mr. Pembroke, the Spring Creek deed is jointly held. By the survivorship clause, on the death of my husband on the 8th of March, the entire fee simple vested in me. The writ you bear devises only such property as was, at the date of my husband's death, his to devise. The Spring Creek property was not his alone to devise. He could not, under Colorado law, devise it. The writ is, with respect to the Spring Creek property, void ab initio. She paused. She said it again in Welsh. The Welsh was for the foreman, who did not understand it, and for Mr. Dawes, who did not understand it, and for the small Welsh half of her that wanted on this morning to be heard. She said it a third time in Latin, and the Latin took half a minute, and was, by Sidwell's account, faultless. Pembroke said finally, "Madam, I cannot accept this as the final position of the—" There was at this moment a single sound from the street outside the Clarendon Hotel. It was the report of a revolver. Mr. Sidwell, in his later account, wrote that he was very much surprised that no one in the lobby moved. The proprietor of the Clarendon, behind the desk, did not move. Mr. Dawes did not move. Sam Doolittle, who was standing at the foot of the staircase with his hat in his hand, and who had been standing there for 40 minutes, did move. But he moved by a very small amount, and the movement consisted of his shifting his weight from his right foot onto his left, so that his right hand was free. Mrs. Wexford did not move. After what may have been 5 seconds, the proprietor of the Clarendon turned to the boy at the desk and said quietly, "Step out the back door, please, and see who is shot." The boy stepped out the back door. He came back at a run 2 minutes later and said, "Mr. Tabor, it's the Halvorson man, Crane. He shot at a man up on the roof of the livery on the opposite corner. The man on the roof has not come down. Crane has rode out of town." Mr. Doolittle very quietly said, "That'll be Joaquin on the roof of the livery on the opposite corner, ma'am." She nodded very slightly. She did not turn her head. "Is he hit?" "I would expect not. Mr. Doolittle, please go out and confirm." He nodded. He went out. He came back within 4 minutes. He stood at the foot of the staircase again. "He is not hit, ma'am. He had positioned himself there at the request of myself this morning. Crane saw him on the roof, took a shot, and rode." "Thank you, Mr. Doolittle. Mr. Pembroke." She turned, very evenly, back to Pembroke. "You were saying, sir, that you could not accept this as the final position of the—" Pembroke, by Sidwell's account, was at this point looking not at Mrs. Wexford, but at Mr. Doolittle, who was standing at the foot of the staircase with his hat in his hand, and whose right hand, Sidwell now noticed, was resting on the butt of a Colt single-action holstered at his left hip, in the cross-draw fashion preferred by men who had carried a revolver across the Mexican border under hostile circumstances. The right hand was not gripping the butt, it was resting on the butt. The distinction, on Sidwell's account, was clear. "Madam," Pembroke said. He cleared his throat. "Madam, I shall need to consult by wire with Chambers." "Of course. The Western Union office is at Harrison and East 7th. It is open until 10. Mr. Dawes will gladly give you a copy of the Pueblo decree to wire across, if Chambers should desire to read it in full." Mr. Dawes, "Of course, Mrs. Wexford. Mr. Pembroke, before you go, I would draw your attention to one further matter. The decision of the Colorado Supreme Court in Wolcott v. Branscombe, 1879. It bears the name of Wolcott because the late Mr. Wolcott of Denver appeared as counsel, and bears the name of Branscombe because Mr. Branscombe of Denver appeared on the other side, although Mr. Branscombe is now my counsel, held that the courts of this state will look to the lex loci re sitae in matters of real property, and to the lex domicilii of the parties only in matters of personality. The writ you bear deals with real property. The lex of the citus is the law of Colorado. The law of Colorado, by Statute of 74, by the Constitution of 76, and by the Pueblo Decree of 80, holds with me. She stood. So did Pembroke. He picked up his leather case. He bowed, very slightly. Sidwell would later write that the bow was the bow of a man who has been hit hard, in his profession, by a person he had not believed capable of hitting him, and who has the decency, having recognized this, to bow. He did not in fact return to Chambers. He returned to Denver on the morning stage of the 11th of May, and from Denver he sent one telegram to London. Deed fatally defective, stop. Colorado law unfavorable, stop. Withdrawing writ, stop. Returning soonest, stop. Pembroke. And he caught the eastbound train at noon. He did not, so far as I have been able to trace him, return to Colorado in his life. He died in 1907 in a London suburb of a cancer of the stomach, leaving no will. Halvorson of the Barty was the more difficult problem because Halvorson did not, on the 10th of May, give up. But this, in the end, was solved not by the Pueblo Decree, but by the fact that Halvorson, hearing on the 12th of May from his banker in Leadville that the foreclosure on the Wexford bank loan was no longer collectible, because Mrs. Wexford had walked into the Leadville bank on the morning of the 11th and paid down the $2,700 in Eagle gold drawn against her draft on the boatmans of St. Louis, 6 months before the loan was due, concluded that the lady was not going to break, and that the bank was not going to break for her, and that there was nothing left to play. Halvorson then made the one decision he made in this entire matter that proved sensible. He rode out, in person, on the 15th of May to Spring Creek. He asked for her at the Porch. She came out. She did not invite him in. Mrs. Wexford? Mr. Halvorson, I'd like to offer my apologies for the fence. That is generous of you, Mr. Halvorson. I take it for what it is. And I'd like to ask whether the south pasture might be available for lease. It might. I should want a 5-year term. I should want $1,200 a year, payable each March in advance. I should want a clause forfeiting the lease on any further interference by any person in your employ with my fence. I should want our brand on every steer that comes off your range onto my pasture, and my brand on every steer that comes off mine onto yours. I should want a clause requiring you to provide, at your expense, the wire and posts for the south fence for the duration of the lease. He thought about this. He thought about it for a long while. He took off his hat. Mrs. Wexford, those are stiff terms. They are honest terms, Mr. Halvorson. I have been dealing in honest terms since the 4th of April, when I came off the stage and your driver told me I would not last a month. Halloran is not my driver, ma'am. He is the driver of a stage company in which you hold a 1/3 interest, Mr. Halvorson. The records of the state of Colorado are not difficult to read. He put his hat back on. He looked, very briefly, at Mr. Doolittle, who was standing on the porch behind her, and he nodded once. All right, ma'am. I'll have my man draw it. Mr. Branscombe of Denver will draw it. You will sign what he draws. Good afternoon, Mr. Halvorson. Halloran, the stage driver, retracted in print on the 18th of May. He sat in the office of the Leadville Reveille, which was the town's weekly, and dictated a single paragraph for the next number, which the editor printed under the heading, A Correction. The paragraph ran, On the afternoon of the 4th of April past, I made, in the hearing of 3 idlers at the depot, the observation that the lady recently arrived from England would not last a month at Leadville. I have since learned that I was wrong on every particular. She has lasted. She has the better of Mr. Pembroke of London. She has reset her south fence at her neighbour's expense, and she has paid off her bank, in coin, 6 months before its date. I retract the observation. Halloran. The retraction was followed, in the next number, by 3 further retractions. The clerk, Cresswell, at the depot, retracted. A man named Lloyd, who had been one of the 3 idlers, retracted. Mr. Pembroke of the Inner Temple was, in absentia, recorded by the editor of the Reveille as having made, by a telegram from Denver, a 4th retraction. Whether the telegram had actually been received, the editor declined, when later asked, to say. They were married in November, in the chapel of the Catholic Church on East 7th, with Mr. Dawes as one witness and Mr. Branscombe as the other. There was no scandal at it. The town had, in the matter of Sam Doolittle and Mrs. Wexford, worked out for itself, by the end of summer, what the 2 of them had not yet quite worked out, and had decided to approve of it before the parties themselves had decided to admit it. On the porch of the ranch, on the evening of the 3rd of October, she had been sitting in a low chair, reading a letter from Bowen, Treffer and Bowen of Lincoln's Inn, which advised her that the Welsh barony was hers to renounce or to retain as she chose. She had been thinking about this for an hour. Sam Doolittle had come up the steps and stood on the porch with his hat in his hand. Mrs. Wexford, Mr. Doolittle, ma'am, I'm going to be plain. I've been plain twice in my life. I was plain with Edmund in '76, and I was plain with you on the morning of the 5th of April. I'd like, please, to be plain a 3rd time. She set down the letter. Please be plain, Mr. Doolittle. He took off his hat. He laid it on the porch rail. He took her hand. He held it for the length of 3 breaths, which is what the diary records exactly. Then he let it go. Ma'am, that's the 3rd plain thing. I'll go down to the bunkhouse now. She did not, at that moment, say anything. He turned to go. He had reached the 2nd step when she said, Mr. Doolittle. He turned back. Cordelia. He looked at her. Yes, ma'am. Cordelia, Mr. Doolittle? Yes. Cordelia. He did not that evening go back down to the bunkhouse. He sat with her on the porch until the lamp inside the kitchen, lit some hours earlier by Joaquin Solis, burned down to the nub. She kept the barony. She used it on no document she ever signed in Colorado. The deed at the Lake County Clerk's office continued to read Cordelia W. Wexford until 1891, after which, by her own filing, it read Cordelia Wynne Doolittle. Sam, when asked once in Leadville by a man who did not know him whether he was the husband of a baroness, replied that he was the husband of a Colorado rancher. He did not, in 17 years of being asked, vary the answer. She outlived the silver boom by 12 years, the cattle bust by 38, and her second husband by 26. She ran Spring Creek Ranch until 1912, then leased it to Joaquin Solis and his eldest son, and moved into a small house on Capitol Hill in Denver that she had bought with the money from her renounced personal estate in Wales. She kept, in the front hall of the Denver house, a cradle of pine that she had carried down from the upper room of the Spring Creek Ranch in October 1882, in which the fourth side had never been pinned in. The morning dress in which she had stepped off the stage at Leadville on the 4th of April, 1882, is at the Colorado State Historical Society in Denver,